They're going to give you the answer as to where to go. You probably already knew it, but they're really going to confirm it for you. And then as soon as you start stepping in that direction, two things are going to happen.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Hey, entrepreneurs, refine your servant leadership. We're on today with Jon Kidwell, who actually wrote that book. Welcome, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, can't wait for the conversation. Talk to me right off the bat about what makes you an expert at servant leadership that you wrote this book. What's your experience in it?
Failing enough times to try to figure out that it was something that I could figure out how to do just a little bit differently. And so I grew up in the environment, the culture, wonderful parents where leading by example, having a heart to help other people, being willing to jump in and get your hands dirty, do good work. Like those were all part of the ethos of being able to serve and help people. And that's the way that the leader should be. My dad once told me the leader does not have to be the loudest person in the room. And so I totally grabbed onto that. And that was pretty much how I built the very beginnings of my career and got into leadership. And then I started taking on responsibility. I had a larger team. I had more money to manage. And I realized that me just leading by example, but sadly not actually saying some of the things that people needed to hear by not holding people accountable and then kind of going around and just making sure it got done myself. All of these started to lead to confusion, to my own burnout, and to frustration with the team. And I realized that perhaps I wasn't doing this servant leadership thing the way that it's meant to be done.
So talk to me about failing.
About failing. Well, I think the biggest kind of aha for me of failing was really at that precipice point. I was in an ops meeting. So kind of second team to the executive team. And we're going through just day-to-day pieces. And my COO at the time says at the end of that meeting, "Hey, John, follow me for a second." And it wasn't one of those "Oh, this is going to be fun. He's got something fun to show me. We're going to talk sports." No, I got the immediate energy change and we're going down. We didn't even make it into his office. We just stopped in the doorframe. And he said, "Hey, listen, John, I know everybody knows that you're an honest guy, but when you don't engage in that room, when you don't jump into conflict, when you don't disagree with us, but then go do whatever you want, we all think that you're being dishonest. And if you want to be a part of this team, that needs to change." And you throw that in with kind of this burning out, collapsing Saturday morning thinking, why am I holding every single one of these buckets of water? And how come nobody is understanding that they're supposed to pick these up as well? It really was just a massive gut check for me on what am I supposed to be doing? Because this isn't working for me. It's not working for the organization, and it is not working for the people that I lead.
So I think in your story, you're saying your team suggested, "Hey, John, you're not having conflict with us, and then you're going to do whatever you want anyway."
Yeah.
So that's part of the failure in that story. And now
For sure.
talk to me about the other side of it. So what you learned in that, apparently, is to have conflict with the team. How do you go about having conflict with the team in a way that honors servant leadership? What's the right way to go about it?
So I think about it if the three of us were there, and if any of us were asked, right, John, Rich, or the other John, no H, if any of us were asked, we would say, well, what would we want in those scenarios? Let's say something's not going well. We need some feedback. We have some disagreement around strategy, or we're trying to hash out what is the best way to do this. What would any of us want? Well, we would want the truth. We would want to know as much information as possible, and we would want to be treated with respect while we're going through that process. And so for me, as one that I didn't really grow up doing that, I tuck my shirt in, have a belt, and anything that's an issue, we just kind of sweep under the rug and we just keep moving on. That's the way that I was trained to do it. And a lot of us are trained to do it that way. Hey, show face, make sure everything looks good, but don't ruffle any feathers. And the problem is that when we do that, we don't engage in conflict. We really amplify all of those issues. And so going through a lot of books, reading books like Boundaries and People Fuel, and going to conferences and setting really weird goals like I will disagree with an idea, a piece of information, or an individual once a week for 6 months started to give me the reps and the practice that I needed to show up and engage honestly, uh, challenging, asking questions, but doing it in a way that was respectful. And that if I were on the flip side of it, I'd say, you know what? Like that one might have hurt a little bit, but I'm really glad that we did that. And so I think as we think about how would I want this to go if I were on the other side of it, it really helps guide us into how can I make sure that I'm clear, that I'm kind in the process, but that we don't leave any stone unturned. And that has proven to be a very good way to engage in conflict and feedback and just having honest conversations with team members.
So, Jon, I think Rich and I would both subscribe to the art of effectively handling conflict is very important. The aspect of respect when handling conflict, very, very important. I'm curious as to what your definition is of servant leadership. If you define those two words together, it's not just about conflict, though, right? That's just one
definitely
small
not.
element.
No,
How would you define it? If I said, "What's the Jon definition?" You wrote the book on it here. What is the definition you have for it?
Well, that was really part of that same journey of like, okay, I am a servant leader. That's what I choose to answer when you get into those interview questions. Are like, hey, Rich, hey, Jon, tell me about your leadership. I would say, I'm a servant leader, and then here's what this is. And as I started to go and look, I realized I can't find that anywhere. The closest thing that I got was Googling, because, that's what a young research averse individual does is Google it. So I Google it and I find a servant leader is one who serves. And I felt like I was chasing my own tail. Again, just kind of like, what in the world? And so I started saying, where else might I be able to look? I looked at leader, I looked at leadership. All of those were really too positional, too command and control for the way that I was trying to approach it. So I started reading Maxwell, and he says leadership is influence, reading Patrick Lencioni, and he says that, listen, all leadership is servant leadership. Anything else falls short. And then for me, I have a faith tradition where the Bible is my book that I go to for answers. And so I started going into the Bible and trying to see, what does the Bible say about these things? All of that to say, what I landed on at the very end and what we put in the book is servant leadership is influencing others' thoughts, actions, behaviors toward a shared purpose. That it really has to start with, why are we doing and what are we trying to do together? And then I can influence you through the way that I act, through my attitude, through my thought process, so that yours is now influenced towards that same thing. If we're not trying to go to the same place, if the things that we care about aren't aligned, I'm never going to be able to influence. The only options I have then are command, control, coerce. I got to bend you into that will. But if we can align on, hey, this big thing that we want to do, the way that we want to go about doing it, and what we're all trying to achieve for ourselves, for the benefit of everybody around us, if we are aligned on that, then we got a lot of opportunity to work together, to influence each other, and to show up in a way that really is serving, benefiting, fulfilling, meeting the needs of the people around us, both internal and external to any business.
Love it. So let me repeat that definition I got from you just to clarify that I got this right. Servant leadership is influencing others' thoughts, behaviors, and actions to a shared purpose.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders that I've worked with have struggled with those two words, just like you did. I know an entrepreneur specifically as an example who uses it, well, I'm just being a servant leader. That's what the team wants to do. And I'm being a servant leader. The team wants to do that. I'm going to let them do that. I think it's wrong, but I'm just going to let them go do that because I'm a servant leader, right? And they kind of use that kind of approach to it. I'll tell you the quick story, John, for me, when I learned what servant leadership was, is I joined an organization as the vice president of operations for a third-party transportation and warehousing logistics company. I had never worked in the industry, ever. And I was hired as the vice president of operations and had 1,500 people working in my org chart. Never worked in the industry, knew nothing about warehousing, knew nothing about transportation. And the guy who hired me said, I'm looking for a leader and an entrepreneur. You'll figure it out. So I start meeting with these, directors and of engineering and Six Sigma and everything else. And all I could do was try and support them towards their objectives because I didn't even know how to do their job. Right. And so I kind of learned a little bit. One of their core values was servant leadership. And so the way I phrased it is servant leadership is kind of, reversing the org chart in a way where my team doesn't work for me. I work for them to help them accomplish the goals we've set as the organization. So as they would come to me and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to get done with our customers, what we're trying to do, I would help them remove any roadblocks and help them try and achieve their goals as the servant leader. And that's how I define servant leadership for myself. How would you classify that within your definition? Is that the right way to look at it?
Yeah. And if we could just go back to where we started with that person that you were talking about that said, I'm doing what the team wants, right? Like as servant leader, I'm supposed to be about the people. I'm supposed to be about the well-being of the community. Like it's wonderful. But all of the sentiment that you shared and that I got in there is my hands are up. I'm abdicating some of the responsibility and really authority that I might have in this leadership role. Do what you want. And I'm just going to get mad and come back around and flip out and get angry and do whatever on the back end. Right. And that's not it. What you were talking about is much more of that approach. And the piece that I would just add in there that for me was the challenge, because I kind of look at it as there's this spectrum that we go on, that there's the boss, and none of us really want to go be that, right? Like in your scenario would be, I'm coming in, dudes, I got the title, like I don't care if you know everything, like I'm in charge, and yeah, that's a cool idea, but we're going to do this, right? Like that would be coming in and starting to boss people around, instead of your approach, John, where you said that you all are the experts. Let me serve you. Let me remove these roadblocks. Sometimes, like our friend that was at the beginning, we do have to do that strategic service. We do have to outline some of where we might be going. We do need to stand really gently strong. And this is the culture. This is the ethos of the team. I might have to course correct even in supporting and removing roadblocks by saying, the way that we just kind of went about that whole project, we ran over this other department over here. Like that's not us. We got to figure out how not to do that next time. So it is this wonderful both and of absolutely kind of sitting in the power and authority of I'm here to lead, which means I'm responsible to you all and this organization and to the things that we agree on. And then I am also here to serve. I'm here to do, and we actually use the exact same words you do, John, is remove roadblocks. That is one of my major things is how can I, if we think about it like a 2-lane highway, how can I fill in potholes? How can I move those barriers? How can I clear cones out of the way that you all can go?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And to me, I've said this to many people before. You want to learn how to be a servant leader, go be the leader of an organization that you know nothing about and know nothing on how to do it. Like go be the head coach for the New York Jets and help solve their problems, even though you've never played the game of football. That's a servant leader, right? Because you got an offensive coach, you got a defensive coach, you got to figure out what to remove the roadblocks, get them the players, whatever it may be. Yeah. I love that. But it strikes me, Rich, as we have this conversation, that how can you influence others' thoughts, behaviors, actions, and shared purpose, and when you don't have authenticity and trust with your team? And you mentioned that, John, earlier. Your team didn't trust you. You would come in and do something and then not say anything and then do something completely different, or come in and say something and do something. You didn't have that trust built with the team. You can't influence others' thoughts, behaviors, and actions to a shared purpose without trust. And Rich, I know that's something you're really passionate about. So I'm curious as to, Rich, how you see servant leadership and trusted leadership and what the differences are between those two in your mind.
Gosh, I think trust is necessary to be a leader of any sort. And I think the simple definition of leadership is people are following. Because if you think you're leading and there's no one following, you're actually not, in fact, leading. And if you think you're not a leader and someone is following, you're still leading. So leadership is people are following, and people are following because they believe and trust that you're going in a direction that is good for them. And I think without trust, there is no opportunity to influence thoughts and behaviors and action. And when skepticism creeps in from the team, I think it slows everything down, where we have to re-explain and reconvince and reestablish our character and common sense of purpose and what our competence is. And that just slows things down. Where if we could have a pattern of trust, we can tend to go a little bit faster. That would be my take on it. John, what's yours?
I could not agree more. And I'll just put in a big stumbling block for a lot of us that are servant leaders that do aim to do business to help other people, both in and outside of our organization, is so often we break that thing which is most important, trust, by taking away every piece of margin that we have and almost tripping our way into breaking trust because we overextend ourselves, because we overcommit, because we say, I'll be home at 5 for dinner, and then we show up at 6:15, because we tell our team, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, when perhaps it was actually their monkey to take back out of the room and go do themselves. And the most appropriate thing might have been is, yeah, that sounds like a really challenging problem. What do you think we should do? And letting them go back with it. I take all of these things on, and in the process of it, I create 150% of a job that I might be able to do, or 150% of a life that I might be able to live into. And I start breaking small, little incremental commitments, which over time start to erode my trust. And so it's one of the things that we say is, while our heart is there, we have that servant heart, we need it. We also need to make sure that as servant leaders, more than always being available to everyone and everything, we are present and focused on what it is that we're doing right now and the people who are around us.
John, when I think of servant leadership and I think of the opportunity for a leader to cast a vision and to corral people around the energy around a vision,
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity for those to conflict a little bit. That the vision of the leader potentially being conflicting with serving the individuals. Can you tell me about how you might negotiate that? How do you cast a strong vision, stay disciplined to a strong vision, but then also be a servant leader while you're at it?
This is an interesting question. I think I have a path to go down, but maybe give me an example. Are you saying something like, if the vision is really focused on the leader or on the organization, but neglecting potentially some of that ripple effect benefit, or were you thinking a different
An
thing?
example might be the leader of the organization says, we have a vision to impact X number of people with our product or service. We want to impact 1,000 people.
Wonderful.
And the way that we do that is we put out high quality products with speed.
Mm-hmm.
And now that same leader has a division in the company who really loves innovating.
Yeah.
And they tend to overthink things.
Yeah.
But when they do take the time to overthink things, they come up with pretty good products, but it slows things down.
Yeah.
Well, the vision is high quality products with speed is going to get us to 1,000.
Yeah.
And I've got this division or this individual or a couple of people that they love creating new systems and processes.
Yep.
And I want to be a servant leader to these people because that's part of their zone of genius.
100%.
But I also need to stay disciplined to this vision of high quality products and fast. How do I do both?
Yeah, that is a great question, and honestly, it's the tension that all of us feel, right? Of quality and speed, of performance and people, of being able to generate profit while continuously being generous in and outside the organization. We feel that. So, some things for this individual to consider is, when you have that, before you go out. And I like, listen, I am, you said zone of genius. My zone of genius is rallying people and coming alongside and helping support. Like I love to do that. So I will fire before anyone's ready and before I aim. Like I know that about myself 100%. So if anyone out there is like that and you have this vision, it came to you overnight, came to you in the shower, whatever it is, take just a beat and start to ask yourself these questions. Why is this important? Why is this important? Why is this important? And as you start to do that, you're going to start to give yourself the answers that your team wants to hear as to why this vision is important. And I would say at least do it 3 times, but you may do it even further than that because you're going to get to answers like, we're going to serve 1,000 customers through this product. And it's important because it meets this pain point. It's important because 1,000 is a number that gets us into this percent black margin. Like if we only sell 550, we ain't making it there, team, right? But it gets us to this. And that's important because when we get to this, then we can renew our benefits. Then we can share profits. Then we can look at comp pieces. Then we can. So there is a reason why that particular vision is important. And sometimes we don't take those steps to ask why. And then on the flip side, if we use Jon's model of essentially you invert the pyramid, I think for that leader or that kind of CEO coaching the division head, going to say, you are wicked geniuses. You all are creative. And, we kind of have the relationship where we know, like, if left to one's own device, you might give us 17 things over 17 weeks, but we really only need one thing this week, right? And yeah. Okay. So what do you all need and how can I help you? Because the target is 4 weeks from now, we have X. Like that level of clarity and getting them to this and then saying inside of that, I mean, run, friends, and let me continue to do that. Is it that I check in? No, we don't need you to check in. That feels micromanaging. Okay. What is it that you need? Honestly, what we need is we need that definitive timeline because we're going to go big, but if you tell us it's got to be this, we'll hit this. Okay. This is what it is. It is this piece. And then I often try to connect the dots and say, here's why that 4-week window matters, because as soon as you all get that, we actually have to turn it over to risk, to marketing, to all of these folks. And if they don't get it in the proper sequence, we're never going to make our goal. And as soon as we kind of connect the dots of like, oh yeah, I don't just have to produce this and turn it in Thursday so we can send it on Monday, like other people's jobs line up, it really helps me see where I fit into that puzzle. And as soon as we have that kind of that level of communication, it serves them to know their parameters. It serves them to know how they connect to the organization and where their work is most critical and most important.
I love that. I think the 2 things that I'm taking from your answer, one is I've never heard of the why is this important in doing that 3 times. I think many of us have heard of asking why 5 times and you kind of get to the root, but specifically going to why is this important? And then what you get after 3 or 4 times of asking that is something that is the most important to recast the vision with those people who are kind of off plan. That's number 1 I got. Number 2 I got is if that in fact is their zone of genius, is in innovation, to give them some boundaries within the vision on where to innovate. So not that innovation is bad or innovation is wrong, but maybe innovating on the what isn't what's needed right now. And we need you to innovate on the how.
Exactly.
How do we do this? That's where I need you to be innovative. So it's redirecting their zone of genius to be within that vision that was cast.
Yeah, exactly. Creativity and innovation actually happens most inside of some form of constraint. You use the word boundaries. It's just like if you and I were sitting here and we were thirsty. If we took a big pitcher of water and we dumped it on the table, we have a mess. But if we took a big pitcher of water and dumped it in a glass, like now we can quench our thirst. And it's the same thing. We don't often get to operate without any sort of bound. But to say, here's the time frame, here's the money, here we're not changing the what. We're the what is working, but the how is not working. And we need you all to figure out that piece. Now, all of a sudden, then you get to completely unleash them on an area that they're going to bring their genius, their creativity to the most needed problem that you're trying to solve.
You talked about a spectrum and you started with boss. I'm not sure I captured that full spectrum. So
I'm not sure that I said it.
yeah, that's okay. So I got boss on the left side of what I have notes on.
Yeah.
Can you establish what is that that whole spectrum?
Yeah. So as I was going through and thinking about servant leadership, I was one of those where I was like, I don't ever want to be that boss, that command, control, jerk, kind of not willing to get in and do the work with my team, right? And just kind of pushing people around, telling them where to go, and like all of that all of us can think back in our career, and we usually can identify like, oh yeah, that person was a boss. We've got one, right? Mine was Terry, and that's all we need to say about Terry. But everybody's got one. And then on the other side, as I really started talking with servant leaders and going in and trying to figure out where might the other side of this be, I realized I don't think it's servant leadership, because I started talking to folks and they would say things like, I thought if I was a servant leader, it meant I had to be a doormat. And I don't really say that because this is what people think. And I don't really say that because servant leaders seem to take away all of the business side, and it's just people. And the world that I live in, I have to do both. And so what I really saw on the other side of that was subservient leaders, those that abdicate some of that responsibility, those that may not step in to be assertive. And so as I started going through, then squarely in the middle is where I put servant leadership, one that actually does both. And I often ask folks inside of keynotes or facilitations and say, give me the qualities of a leader: visionary, decisive, driven. And we get all of those things. And then I ask them about servant leader, and they say empathetic, accepting, honest, full of integrity. And I said, don't we all want a leader that does both of those things? And that's where we land in the middle, as that is what a servant leader is and does. It is not something less than leadership. It is actually something more that says not only are we going to do this, but how we do this is in fact important, because where we're going and what we're doing matters. It matters to us. It matters to our community. It matters to the customers that we serve. It matters to the world that we live in. And we're going to make a positive impact. And because of that, we are going to be visionary, driven. We're going to be a little risky. But in the process of doing that, we're going to be full of integrity, empathetic, making sure that we are working to grow people as we grow this business.
Jon, I want to say this a little more bluntly to listeners. I don't even think Terry thought he was a boss.
Yeah.
But if you're listening to this going, oh yeah, I'm a servant leader, what I've experienced is exactly what you just said. They're actually subservient leaders. They're pushovers, and they feel like they are a servant leader. I'm letting my team do whatever they want to do, but accountability is thrown out the window. Results start failing. Everybody feels great, and there's a lunch party, but the lack of going after the vision and holding your team accountable and being the leader you really want, the visionary leader that's driving the business forward, starts going downwards. And so one of the problems I'm seeing here, I'm curious as to your take on it, is the self-awareness and the self-identification. I was put into a situation where I had to be a servant leader, and I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of a cool way to lead. 'Cause you could argue that maybe in my past before that, I was more of a boss, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of learned how to come to that middle by being put into that role. You had a failure of some kind where you had an awakening and go, okay, I need to go buy this book and learn from this Jon guy, right? Kind of situation.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this as an entrepreneur, and you're thinking, yeah, I'm a servant leader, I don't need to listen to this anymore, I don't need his book, how can you self-diagnose whether or not you need to really learn the difference between subservient and boss?
So for me, it was a really big question that I asked myself. And who is this for? Like when I avoid conflict, who is this for? Well, it's for me. When I don't hold my team accountable, who is this for? It's for me, because it makes me uncomfortable. When I go behind somebody after not holding them accountable and then do their work and then turn it in and make sure that we all look good in front of the boss, right? Like, who's that for? Well, it's for me. I just came in and saved the day. And so who is that really serving? And that was the thing that I had to come to terms with was, oh my goodness, in my own kind of mode of trying to serve other people, I might in fact be the most self-serving that I've ever been. And actually perhaps living in my own comfort zone of those pieces and not stepping into some of the uncomfortableness, like sitting down and actually asking somebody, hey, how you doing? And then everybody says good. And you say, it doesn't seem that way. How you really doing? That's really uncomfortable. It's scary. I don't know where that's going. I'm going to quickly get in over my head. But perhaps that's the thing that person needs the most. Or to go to a team member just like I had, and we were working through a performance thing. And she just looked and said, is my job on the line here? Yes. Now, how can I help you win? What can I help you do to succeed? That level of honesty, it's really uncomfortable. I still got goosebumps. This was like 9 years ago that conversation happened, but you still feel it.
Yeah.
Stepping out into, who is this for?
Yeah.
Well, if I'm really here to serve other people, if I'm really here to benefit the organization, if I'm really here to benefit the people that we serve, it's probably going to be a different answer than me when I ask that, who is this for? And when that is true, then I believe that we're really stepping into what it is to be a servant leader.
Yeah, what a great point, because of the avoidance of performance issues, right? The avoidance of conflict, the avoidance of all these things is probably a sign that you may be wrong on your definition of servant leadership. And you may be thinking you're a servant leader, but you're actually a subservient leader. I love the way that you phrase that, because I know too many entrepreneurs who hide behind, I'm a servant leader. It's okay. My team's not performing. I'm being a servant leader. I'm trying to help them. They're just not getting it. That's not servant leadership. And I also believe that it's not just the person leading the organization that needs to be a servant leadership. People that are directly working with customers need to be servant leaders to their customers.
100%.
And
it's customer service, right?
Yeah,
it's baked into the way that we describe it. Yeah.
That's exactly it. So what actions beyond buying your book, which is Redefine Your Servant Leadership, which people should go get, what are a couple of other actions entrepreneurs or leaders listening to this right now can take over the next week to start working on these areas? You mentioned as an example, be present.
Yeah.
You talked about handle conflict. Would there be any more tips you'd give somebody to say, hey, 1, 2, 3, you got to make sure you're doing these 3 things if you want to start showing up as a servant leader?
So I think first and foremost, I would encourage folks to start with themselves. We want to lead ourselves first. That is the best place. So asking yourself, like, the who is this for is a great exercise as you start to look at some different places that you are showing up. And that's a big, like, heady type of question. So some practical things that you can do are start to write down some of those principles or values that truly matter to you. Maybe it's your team. You might be in the middle of the organization, but kind of as for me and mine, right? And so for me, there's growth, there's team, there's service, there's generosity, there's faith. Like, these are some of the core things that wherever I go, wherever I lead, like, they're going to show up and they're going to be reasons why I make decisions. They're going to be non-negotiable points for me. They're going to be all of those things. They're going to drive how we do the work that we do. So I would encourage anyone to get clear on some of those principles, values, really the things that when push comes to shove, you're going to stand by those. You're going to hire for those. You're going to fire for those. You're going to fight for those. Like, those are so important to your core, your character, how you show up day to day. And then the next thing that I would do is I would turn around and I would ask the really brave and courageous question to each one of your direct reports. And it's uncomfortable and you're going to sweat, and you just tell them, like, hey, I heard this guy on the podcast and he said I should try this. And I really want to, because I'm working on some growth as a leader myself. What's one thing that I can do this week to be a better leader for you? And when you turn around and ask your people that, you are going to get a wonderful picture from, if you got 3 direct reports, if you got 7, if you've got 97. I sure hope you don't have 97. But if you do that, you're going to start to see patterns. And they're going to give you the answer as to where to go. You probably already knew it, but they're really going to confirm it for you. And then as soon as you start stepping in that direction, 2 things are going to happen. Their respect and trust in you is going to go up, and their own interest in growth and asking you that question is actually going to go up. Because when someone gives us feedback and we act on it, it blows everybody's mind. We've all filled in surveys and never heard anything back. We've all finished a presentation and been like, how was that? And everybody in the room was like, it was good. So as soon as they see that, things are going to start to change for you and for them.
I can't remember when this was, but I remember hearing that feedback from somebody before, and I actually did it that week. We have something called goal setting and reviews, what we used to have with our employees, and we meet with them every Monday and meet with them. And I can remember asking that question: what's the one thing I can do this week to be a better leader for you? And what a powerful question I found it to be. I think it's fantastic advice. I mean, it's so simple. It's such a simple question at the end of your meeting to just ask that question and just see how much respect and trust and all the stuff you talked about grows. That's a great way to end this conversation, and people should really, really take that actionable piece of advice from you. Jon, how can people learn more? I'm assuming they can find Redefine Your Servant Leadership on Amazon, I guess. But how can people learn more about you and what you do?
Thank you. On Amazon, or just typing it in, Redefine Your Servant Leadership. It'll take you to redefineyourservantleadership.com. Either one of those places, you can get it. Would love if y'all picked it up. That'd be so much fun. And you can find me at Jon Kidwell, no H, across the socials. And then the work that my company, Leadwell, and I do, you can find at leadwell.com.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jon.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Stay tuned as Jon and Rich unpack today's conversation.
You had said that you asked, what's the one thing that I can do differently for you to be a better leader this week? And you did that. What were some of the answers you got? Do you remember? What's the type of thing that you get back when you ask that?
Yeah, I don't remember specifically what each person had said that day. What I remember was the reaction. I remember like the look on their face of me asking them for feedback, me asking them for one thing I could do to help them that week. And for most of them, where they went to was their roadblock, if I recall correctly. Like I'm really stretching to remember, but I think it was very tactical. It was like, here's one thing I've been struggling with forever. Like I can't get Jimmy in accounting to help me do this or whatever. If you could help me do that, really help me. And I'd be like, okay. So a lot of it was very tactical. None of it was, you need to respect me more this week, and that would make you a bit, it wasn't very macro. It was very, this week, I'm looking at what I need to do this week. Here's something you could help me this week to be a better leader. It was very much that. But what it did from a feeling perspective was, oh, wow, he's asking for my feedback on what he can do to be a better leader. I volunteered, and then he did it, which I absolutely made a focus of. I'm going to do whatever they're telling me I need to go do. And if I recall correctly, I think I started going on a little bit of a trend for a few weeks of, hey, what can I do this week to be better? Because I felt it was so powerful of a question to ask. Because in a meeting, the subordinate is not going to just say, hey, Rich, can I tell you something you could do to be a better leader to me this week? They're not just going to naturally do that unless you open the door to those types of conversations, which inevitably they're going to say, thanks for asking. Here's what you could do. By the way, what's one thing I could do this week to really help perform better for the company, or whatever it may be? That trust and that relation, the feedback loop just opens up. It was so powerful.
I guess when I think about that question, I guess I'm not surprised at your answer. The question was, what can I do? And you got back things you could do within a week.
That's right.
Like, it's going to be tactical. I wonder what would happen if you changed the question to something like, who do I need to become to be a better leader?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you might get things like, I need you to be more understanding, or I need you to listen more. I wonder if that would yield things that have more substance than tactical answers. Is who do I need to become to be a better leader?
Well, yeah, how you ask a question is critically important. We know that. I wonder if doing something like that at the end of a meeting would be an appropriate thing to do, right? Are you putting the employee or the subordinate on the spot, as an example? But I could definitely see a 360 evaluation where you're asking your team to be brutally honest on how you can become and be a better leader to them. I could easily see, hey, by the way, I know I've been asking you what I could do this week to help you. Can you for next week just think about a couple of traits you'd like for me to bring to be a better leader overall? Giving them the space to think about it as opposed to put them on the spot is probably more appropriate, whether that be a 360 kind of evaluation or let them think about it and come back to you. I think it's very appropriate, but yeah, it's all in the question.
I have a coaching client right after we close here, and I think I'm going to ask that of this coaching client. Just ask him, hey, who would I need to become? What do I need to do a little bit more of in how I work with you? And I want to stay on the who do I need and not what do I need to do. So I'm going to figure out what's the question I want to do with it, and I'm going to report back to you on how that went.
Yeah.
Just switching gears, I like that spectrum he had on bosses on one side and subservient leader is on the other. It fits the on the one side under boss as maybe micromanager and using force versus subservient leader is just being absent as the abdicating leader. And that one right in the middle is a balance of the two. I liked how he also went through the what do you think of when you think of a leader? And he said vision and driven and strength. Well, what do you think of when you think of a servant? And then can you be both?
Yep.
I thought that was a really neat way to go about it, was to identify those definitions separately that yield different ways of being. And can you combine those into one leader?
Great point. What a fantastic exercise to run with a leadership team or a group of leaders, is ask them that question, right?
Yeah.
Ask them about both sides and ask them, how do you become the middle? I love that. And I do think, Rich, I don't want to bring us back to the prior question, but one thought I had was when you first start a relationship with somebody, whether it be a customer relationship, whether it be a coaching relationship like you just talked about, or a subordinate kind of manager relationship, right off the bat saying, hey, talk to me about leaders you've had in the past and what kind of leadership suits you well, right? What are you looking for me as a leader? And let me tell you a little bit back the other way, like how I've, work as a leader, and let's make sure we keep the lines of communication open on this, right? I think it's just a really good way to go about it. But yeah, the exercise, I think the reason why that's important, Rich, that exercise you just talked about, is I think the mislabeling of servant leadership. The whole, and this is something John mentioned after we were done recording, but like sometimes you're in that subservient, laissez-faire, kumbaya, everything goes, your performance starts becoming lackluster, but hey, we had lunch party, people wanted lunch, so I ordered in lunch kind of thing, and you think you're doing the right thing. That's not it. That's not what it is. So I love the idea of looking at both spectrums, the boss and the subservient, and going, if you take the best of both of those, can you build this servant leader model in the middle? I think hits right on. And I think the part that you mentioned, I asked you about, is all of this is impossible without trust. You may trust the subservient leader because they just let you do whatever you want. You don't trust the boss, but you can't be a servant leader unless you have trusted leadership.
I don't want to break my arm patting myself on the back, but I really liked the question that I asked and the answer I got around casting a vision and being a servant leader. I think it's a real conflict that leaders have, is how do I be a servant leader when they're doing something that I don't think is in alignment with where we need to go? How am I going to serve them in the midst of that scenario? And the answer, I think, was terrific. It was recast the vision as to why this is important, and then take whatever work they're doing that seems to be slightly misguided, the skills that they're applying to do that work, redirect them to a place that does serve the vision. Very rarely in a company does an employee purposefully go against the vision. They think they're doing what's in the best interest of the company, what's in the best interest of applying their skills. And often they're very open to being redirected. They just need that redirection. And what they don't need is somebody being laissez-faire about servant leadership. And what they don't need is somebody who's a micromanager. They need to be redirected. Here's why our vision is so important. Here's what I see you doing that's not working towards it. This would. Can you do the same thing, but do it here? I think is so important.
Yeah, no doubt. And so if you're still listening to this, go look to redefine your servant leadership. Go get Jon's book on Amazon, because I think we all need a little refinement on our definition of what that is and how powerful that can be to a business. So go get the book, Amazon.com, Redefine Your Servant Leadership.